Hi, everyone. This is Paul Casey, the Kempo Karate Hall of Fame educational video series. Today is a very special day in our community. We will be celebrating the life of the founder of American Kempo, Edmund K. Parker Sr. You'll hear personal stories from his students that trained with him, those that knew him well, and you also hear stories from our up-and-coming seniors that will talk about inspirational moments in their life, in their journey in Kempo from Mr. Parker's teaching. I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you very much.
Reflection on Ed Parker. I met the man in February of 1959, and his relationship and mine continues, I should say, until today. There's hardly a day goes by that I don't think of him in one way or another. Something he says, something he did. He's been an inspiration to me for all those years. I'd like to tell you a little story about what happened early on in our relationship. I was still a brown belt, as a matter of fact, and we were working out alone after the class. And this was in 1961 and 62, whatever, and very early on. And I proposed to him that we make some films so that people could see him move, because Kempo is nothing until you see it move. The dynamics are nothing until you see him move. A still picture is worth 1,000 words. Then a movie has to be worth 1,000,000. And that's what I wanted, for the public to see him. And the only way I could think of it was to make some films that we call them training films. Well, you couldn't do much training without vocalization, but we tried, and we did pretty good. We did pretty good. They're still around. You can see them on YouTube. Well, when I made the proposal, I said, I will do the production. I'll do the editing. I'll do get the product ready for sale. I'll take the orders. I'll do the advertising. I'll do everything, and we'll be partners. And we'll make it a 60-40 split, 60% in your favor, because without you, there are no films. Without you, there's no reason to do this. So that's the proposal. He said, let me think about it. So the week went by, and our next workout, I said, have you thought about my proposal? He says, I like the idea. The idea is great. We should make these films. I said, great. He says, but the 60-40 thing, no. Okay. I thought, well, I overstepped my bounds. It's going to be 75-25, 80-20, something like that. And he looked at me and he said, Chuck, we're going to be equal partners. We got to split it equally, 50-50. I thought to myself, most people negotiate themselves up. He's just negotiating himself down. Of course, that's the proposal we went with, because that's what he wanted. The man was a visionary. He really knew what he wanted when he wanted it. And I think about him in situations like, in the back of my head, I'd say, what would Ed say? How would Ed move it? How would he handle this? And that's helped me a lot. And I'd like to add a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays wishes to everybody from the IKCA and from my old partner, Ed Parker. Merry Christmas.
It's Lee Wedlake from San Antonio, Texas. And Paul, I wanted to say thanks for having me part of this project in December of 2022. It's the month that we remember Mr. Parker's passing, the man who meant so much to us all, 32 years ago. And one of the memories I had about him was that when he was flying from coast to coast, and he would change planes in Chicago O'Hare, which was at the time the busiest airport in the world, he would take the time to go find a payphone and some change, drop it in the slot, and give me a call at my school just to say hello. And those of you that knew him know that he used to like to announce himself on the phone. It's Ed Parker, Ed Parker. He always said it twice. It was always good to hear his voice and have a short talk with him on the phone. Nice to know he was thinking about you and would take that time out to do that sort of thing. Anyway, I wish you all the best of the holidays. And Paul, once again, thank you.
Hi, this is Senior Master of the Arts Dennis Conatser, wishing everyone a wonderful holiday season. I'd like to take this moment to share with you a moment at Christmas time with Ed Parker years ago. I was in Pasadena for a lesson, and Mr. Parker, during a break, said, "Hey, let's go to the mall. I got to go pick up something." So we went to the mall, and as we were walking through the mall with music playing and all the festive ornaments and decorations around the mall, he stopped for a moment, looked up, and I said, "What, are you okay? Is anything wrong?" He goes, you know, the music, it reminds me of Christmas time and my father, Arthur." And so he listened to the music for a few more moments, and when it was done, he goes, "Okay, come on, let's go." And we went and carried on and went and picked up whatever he needed to pick up. But I thought it was a touching moment, and one that I'll always remember. I think he had a tear in his eye, because it brought back memories of his father, Arthur, at Christmas time. And I thought I'd share that with you, part of the personal side of Ed Parker and part of something that touched him. And Christmas was always very special to him because it recalled, childhood family memories. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful holiday season.
So let's meet our panel. Each one of them is a senior in the Kempo community. In other words, they're all high-ranking Kempo black belts. You will meet each one of them, and I'm going to introduce you to them, and they're going to say a little bit about themselves, and then they're going to talking about their expressions of Ed Parker's Kempo and how it has inspired their career in their martial arts journey. Furthermore, they'll leave some personal anecdotes of how the holidays are important to them. Thank you. So let's start off with the gallery here and get everybody involved. All the way from Texas, would you please give a warm welcome to Master of the Arts, Tommy Burks. Hello, Tommy. How you doing? Good to see you.
I'm doing good, Paul. How are you, sir?
Great. How's that car of yours?
You what?
Your car.
Oh, that car's great.
I know. I saw it. Beautiful.
I've been wanting one of them for a lot of years, so finally made a dream come true.
But one of these days, you'll have to share a little more on it. You driving down the wonderful streets of Texas, but not when it's cold and windy or rainy or snowing. That would be important. Let's go up and say hello to Timothy Beers. Tim, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much. You can call me Tim.
Good. And it's good to have you on here. And you're representing, obviously, Chuck Sullivan.
Yes, I've been with Chuck Sullivan since February of 1981, when I was 19 years old and walked in as a kid. And February will be 43 years with Chuck. And what an honor to know him and be with him all these years.
Congratulations. And we're really pleased that your first time on here,
yes,
on the Zoom meeting, and your first time doing these. So you got through it. This is good. Let's go all the way back down to Texas and say hello to one of our newly inducted Hall of Fame members, one of my favorite people, Brian Duffy. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, Paul. I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and how's your wife?
She's doing great. She's doing one of her songwriting meetings today, but she's doing fine. Thank you.
She's a lovely lady. If you ever get a chance to meet Brian's wife, incredible, a lot of energy. She's like the one that gets out there and does her thing when she's around a group, and you're a very lucky man there, Brian. So let's go over to the Northeast and start to move that way. And let's talk to Gary Ellis. Hello, Gary. How are you doing, sir?
Hi, I'm doing very well, thank you. It's very cold over here, though. It's -1, -2 this evening, so it's very icy.
Well, it is a pleasure to have you on here. And then finally going down over, let's go across the border. Let's talk to our good friend all the way in Canada, Mr. Jamie Seabrook. Hello, Jamie. How you doing?
Thanks so much for having me on the show, as always, Paul. It's always a pleasure, and it's an honor to be on with all of you.
Thank you so much. You always can bring a positive light to our discussions, your enthusiasm. I loved it when we talked about the Karate Kid, but we're not going to do. I know you're the Karate Kid now, grown up, so that's how it is. Finally, one of my very favorite people, I consider one of my better friends, and he is a tremendous talent. He has offered a lot in the educational side of Mr. Parker's system. Continuing on with that, he's written one book. He's in the process of a second. Would you please give a warm welcome to our friend Todd Durgan? Hello, Todd. How you doing?
Mr. Casey, good to see you. Good to see all of you gentlemen. It's an honor to be here with the likes of all of you men. I've known several of you for quite a while, and only gotten to purview Mr. Ellis's stuff recently. Fascinating. I love your approach, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Let's go to how we just started with you. Let's talk with you. Okay, let's make it all about you right now. And we're going to put that on. And I'm going to ask you, let's see if I can get this red. Place the pin. There we go. All right, Todd. How long have you been in the martial arts? Give us a little background real quick.
Just over 40 years, about 42, 43 years, I think.
And you've always trained up in the Washington area?
Yeah, for the most part, yes.
Under the guidance of?
Well, I've had 3 or 4 different instructors, not all of them Kempo. I actually trained a couple years in and was close to black, but I didn't want to get a black belt in that system in a more of a Shotokan hard traditional karate. And then met Mr. Rainey in '89, and I've been with him ever since.
In your journey, tell us a little bit of why you pursued Kempo and why you've taken the path as an author and writer, expanding on Mr. Parker's teachings.
Well, so the pursuit of Kempo specifically happened more along when I found the Infinite Insights and blazed through those several times and realized that there was a far deeper and greater benefit than just punching and kicking, right? As far as, what was the other question?
How has Mr. Parker's teachings inspired you?
So that goes hand in hand with reading the Infinite Insights and being exposed to that. I would say that the greatest thing is the gift of sight. And what I mean by that is the gift of being able to see concepts and principles and things happening, not just in Kempo and in the Kempo system, but throughout the martial arts, and being able to see the kind of some of the crossover information and some of those things. Like Mr. Seabrook, I know he works, he's a Kale Eskrima as well as jiu-jitsu. So you are able to see some of the crossover benefits. The other thing that you gain, or I gained personally, was the understanding of possibilities and that things, far greater things are possible than just, what you've gotten in class from one day to the next. And lastly would be, I would say, the gift of analysis. If you study Mr. Parker's works and writings, you see the tremendous analytical process that had to have happened in order to build the system proper over the 3 or 4 renditions that he went through.
Let's go over to Tommy Burks. What is the vision Mr. Parker had that inspired you, sir?
Now, the reason I came into Kempo, I spent 18 years in Taekwondo, spent almost 2 years in the Okinawan system. When I got in the Okinawan system, I started asking, why are we doing this? My instructor, who was a 5th degree Japanese instructor, he told me, he says, well, you're not at a level yet that I can explain it to you. And when I came into the Okinawan system, he told me, he says, well, he said, you're a black belt in Taekwondo, but you're going to have to go back to being a white belt. And I said, I don't care. I'm here looking for knowledge. I'm not looking for rank. So when he told me, he said, you're not at a level yet that I can explain that to you. Well, 17 months later, he tested me and promoted me straight to second black. So I asked him the same question. Why are we doing this? And I showed him a move and asked him, explain to me why we do this. His answer again was, you're not at a level yet that I can explain it to you. Well, I could tell he really didn't know. So when I got into Kempo, Kempo has an explanation for everything that you should do. And to me, that was extremely exciting. So during that time I got to spend with Mr. Parker one-on-one after the test, he asked me, he said, how in the world did you learn everything from yellow belt to first black? And I said, because I was testing for first black. He said, well, that's not really a requirement. He said, I generally want to see if people are just getting into the system. He said, most people don't ever get through orange belt. I said, I wasn't testing for orange belt, Mr. Parker. So after that, I had a guy that I had trained with in Taekwondo. He had came into Kempo and studying under a different instructor. And the day after we tested, Mr. Parker gave a seminar at UT Dallas. And Dickie Bowden, the gentleman I'm talking about that I was in Taekwondo with, he showed up at that and we paired off doing techniques. And then after that seminar, he asked me if he could start training with me. Several months down the road, he'd already been in Kempo for like 7 or 8 months. And so he was getting close to his time, but he was supposed to test in that 1-year time limit. So, you know, he wasn't through enough of the material. So several months went by and then I contacted Mr. Parker and I told him, I said, I need to have this guy tested for first black. He's you know, past his 1-year requirement. Mr. Parker says, well, this was like February. He said, I'm going to teach a seminar in Albuquerque, New Mexico, March 26th. He said, if you can have him there on the 25th, we'll do a test. And I said, yes, sir. He asked me, he said, do you know the material for second black? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, okay, you're testing also. Test was over. Mr. Parker came up and he told me, he said, you've never had an instructor. Now you do. I'm your instructor and I will take care of you. About 6 months later, Mr. Duffy up here, he brought Mr. Parker in for a seminar here in Texas. And about halfway through Mr. Parker's class, his black belt class, he came up and he said, wow, you've been working on your homework. And I said, yes, sir. And so to me, Kempo supplied me with what I had been looking for those 20 years prior to getting into it, because I always, even though I came up through an extremely tough Taekwondo system under Alan Steen's little brother, Mike Steen, and several other people, again, you know, Kempo has gave me a journey to follow through my life. I still train, 75 years old. I'm generally on the mat 5 or 6 days a week. I teach, you know, 4 nights a week at least. And so it's been a lifelong journey since I met Mr. Parker, and will continue as long as I can get on the mat and work out.
Thank you, Mr. Burks. I appreciate that. Let's go to Brian Duffy. Brian, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's pick it up with you. Give me a story that reflects, remembers, inspired you in your Kempo journey about Ed Parker.
Well, you know, Mr. Parker was an inspirational person. I met Mr. Parker in the 70s, but I didn't really get to know him that well until the 80s when, as Mr. Burks said, I was bringing him in for seminars here in Austin several times. By that point in time, he, you know, was established as an international martial arts leader, and he had a lifetime of knowledge and experience. And so I was inspired just by being able to spend time with him. But what really inspired me was not just his martial arts prowess, which we all know, you know, but it was his humanity, him as a person. You know, he had traits that were just things that made you remember him. Like one of the things that he did, he had developed a skill to always remember if you had a conversation with him. He would remember your name. He would remember where the conversation was. He would remember the events that happened, so that anytime that you talked to him again, it made you feel like you were important to him. And that was one of the things that, you know, endeared him to so many people. Another, you know, aspect that I really treasured was his kindness and his humility. One of the first times that I brought him in for some seminars, my wife was working part-time. She had a job that she had to go hit, and I had a daytime class, and my son was about 3 years old at the time, so Mr. Parker was at the dojo with us. My wife had gone to do her work errand, and I had to teach the class, and I was worried about leaving, Mr. Parker with my 3-year-old and what might happen. So I'm teaching the class, and my wife gets finished with her errand before she has, before I finish teaching class, and she comes back, and our studio was in an upstairs of a building, and she comes back, and I had one mat that I was teaching the class on. We had 2 mats and separated in rooms, and in the other room, Mr. Parker is on the floor with my 3-year-old son, and they have made paper airplanes, and he had been entertaining my son for about an hour, showing him all the different designs of the paper airplanes that he knew how to make. And he said that, when he was a kid, they used to have contests as to whose paper airplane could fly the farthest. They lived, their school was up on a hill which looked over the sea, and they used to go to the window and throw their paper airplanes out. He said his always worked, his always won the contest. But the thing of it was about this whole experience is that he was very at ease, and did not feel like looking after my son was something that he had to do or whatever. He enjoyed it. It was something that and it endeared him to my wife completely at that point in time. He just had a kindness and a humility about him. And he developed relationships with people, and I have a anecdote about that as well. He came into town. He was traveling with Ellis, and this was late 70s, and he came into town, and he would call up the karate schools in town. So the Kempo schools, just to touch base. So I'm teaching a sparring class, a daytime sparring class. And we're out there fighting with the guys, and the phone rings. One of my guys, Ray, goes to answer the phone, and he's gone for a little while, and he comes back with kind of a funny look on his face. And I said, "What's up, Ray?" He goes, "There's this guy on the phone who says he's Ed Parker." And I said, "Okay, I'll take care of it." And so I walk in the office, pick up the phone, say, "This is Brian Duffy. May I help you?" He goes, "Hey, Brian, this is Ed Parker. I'm here in town. You're with Elvis, and I just wanted to call and check on the guys and see how you're doing and see how the school is going. And, oh, hey, Mr. Parker, and thanks for calling. Would you like to come and visit?" "I know our schedule doesn't permit, but I wanted to touch base." He was building relationships with people, even on his travels. Funny anecdote about that, a couple of anecdotes is one, I finish a phone call and I come back into the class, and Ray's back sparring again. And Ray kind of gives me this funny look, and he goes, I said, "What's the matter, Ray?" He goes, "Was that really Ed Parker?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, I said, "Why?" He said, "Because I told him if you're Ed Parker, then I'm Bruce Lee." So years later, when I started bringing him back into Austin for some seminars, Ray was training with me again, and I I took Mr. Parker over and said, "I want to introduce you to someone who you've met on the phone, Mr. Parker. This is my student, Bruce Lee." They had a good laugh about that. Relationships with people. He endeared himself to people, and it wasn't just because of his martial arts knowledge, that Mr. Burks brought out, which we all know of. We all know that this wonderful system that he codified is now practiced worldwide. Anywhere in the world that you go, you can find an American Kempo in any country, just about. And that, in itself is an amazing quality and feat, but just the person that he was, just his humanity is what, I really remember about the man.
Thank you, Brian.
All right. So we're going to be talking about Mr. Parker here for just a few minutes. make a long story short, the lessons that I received from Mr. Parker were very, very few. We got our lessons from Mr. Parker in group classes. I would say about anywhere from 18 to 22 times in a breadth of 2 years, so that you can figure that out once a month or something of that nature. Not to mention the fact that we also went down, and when I say we, I'm talking about myself and Paul Dye at that particular point, a couple other people. We would go to the Friday night classes, and it was at those classes that Mr. Parker would also teach. So he would teach at 2 different venues for me, and that would be at the Glendora School as well as the Pasadena School. So that said, the best lessons that I ever received, as far as I was concerned, is the one lesson that he came up to Alaska for, and we had him up here to Alaska for a tournament, and I think I got about 15-20 minute lesson at that point. But the most important part about that lesson was that I'd asked him about certain things that was going on in my experiences as a Kempoist and as a martial artist, as I was applying a lot of that stuff to my work, and it was pretty much working. I was really happy with it. I was elated. I was really happy to share it with Mr. Parker at that point, because I couldn't believe that Kempo was working so well. The thing that we talked about was, I was telling him about how confident, how things were coming to me before I was even ready for it, and things would happen. And he started off on a diatribe, and that diatribe was weird, because when I looked at him, I thought to myself, well, you're supposed to be telling me about Kempo. And he wasn't telling me about Kempo. What he was telling me about was about faith. And he was teaching a spiritual aspect of the art that most of us didn't recognize, at least from what I could tell, because after all, I'd only been in the art at that time, say maybe 8 years at the most. That said, I was taken aback just a little bit, because here was a man who was gifted in the art, gifted in destruction, and the whole 9 yards, who had charisma out the yin-yang. And we're talking about faith, and I recognized that at that particular point that we're on a different level of the martial arts. And in America, we don't really relate, especially back in those days, faith with our art. But here he was talking about it, and it never dawned on me that it might have something to do with his own religion, because at that point, we had never really talked about it. I'd been on a trip with Mr. Parker, so it was kind of like he should have said something at that point, I thought anyway. But then again, you know, I was never that close to Mr. Parker, like a lot of people get to be close with him. But that said, I appreciated the idea of what he was teaching me, because at that point, he was talking about faith and how we work do our work in the art, and we do our work on a daily basis. And he was relating it to also my life at that point. I thought about it for many years later, and I realized that at that point, Mr. Parker had given me the greatest lesson that anybody could ever give me. And to this day, I pass that lesson on to my students.
Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Dye, teacher and practitioner of Ed Parker's Kempo Karate. And I thought I might share a couple of stories about Mr. Parker and myself. Stories to maybe let you understand maybe what he was like as a person. We all kind of envision him, you know, standing on the mat and teaching and, you know, doing Kempo, but as we all know, there's more to us than you know, just a physical application of our art. And the first one I want to relay to you happened really quick in my career. You know, my beginning was at Mount Sac College, which was in Walnut, California, which is about 10 miles from where I was living. And Mr. Hebler had a Kempo club on that campus. That's where I actually got my start. Very shortly after that, I was invited to go to his studio and get my Kempo education in the studio itself. And he had a head instructor at the studio. His name was Jim Thompson, and he became my instructor. And within maybe, I don't know, about a 2 or 3 month period, along with my training, I had some small duties in the studio. And one morning, parking lot is basically empty, and Mr. Parker's car came into the parking lot, and I'd never met him before. And, you know, kind of nervous and anxietized, and he walks in the door, and I went over to greet him. You know, I said, "Hello, Mr. Parker, my name is Paul Dye." And he goes, "You don't need to introduce yourself." He goes, "I already know who you are." He goes, "Mr. Thompson already explained to me who you are, and we're both looking forward to seeing you progress in Kempo." And I was pretty shocked, humbled that he knew my name. I kind of, at the time, I maybe realized right away that there's more substance to him than just standing on the mat and him gonna maybe teach karate to me someday. He's a person, he's a human. He's gonna have more facets to his life that, you know, I hope to learn. And of course, years later, as the years go by, then, you know, I learn more about him as a person. And maybe the time period is probably the late 1970s. And as many people know or have heard of, or some of us lived through the experience, he had workouts prior to his international championships in Long Beach. And one year he was going to have the international workout at the Pasadena school. So of course, a lot of Kempo practitioners attended, including myself. And one of the European leaders came over and brought some competitors for the tournament, but he had actually had his firstborn child and was traveling with the child, who was, it couldn't have been much more than a year old. And Mr. Parker opened the class, and we're all ready to do what we do with him teaching. And next thing you know, he's holding the baby in his arms. He conducts the entire class with the baby in his arms. It's, at the time, even as the class was transpiring, you realize that, yeah, he created a system, he's a grand master of a system, but there's a compassion to him and a softer side to him. And even upon closing the class, he's closing the class and he hasn't let go of the baby the entire time. The experience for me was a really, really memorable experience to me. I won't forget that. But hopefully those stories kind of give you an idea what he was like off the mat. And a lot of us that got to communicate with him and visit with him and, you know, go to his home and talk to him in his office and, you know, see him kind of off the mat surface, just like all of us, you know, we're all different, we're all unique, and we all have many sides. And fortunately for myself, I got to see, you know, several of those. And of course, you know, right after the passing is Christmas. That being said, for all my students here in Covina, you know, including myself and Mrs. Dye and all my students, we wish everybody Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and the best in 2023, which really sounds crazy to somebody as old as I am.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to our home here in Austin, Texas. And in case you're confused by the trappings, this is the season. As human beings, we have certain events in our lives that are momentous. We meet somebody, something happens, something takes place. Our first child's born, a loved one dies. And it just seems that when it happens around or during the season, it seems to be more momentous. One momentous event that took place for martial artists, and particularly for Kempo people, was when Ed Parker unexpectedly passed during the Christmas season. And unfortunately, that will always come around to our recollections at this time of year. For some of us, much more profoundly than for others. For some of us, that was an absolutely momentous event, earth-shaking. Others, it was historically significant. But one way or another, his passing at such a young age certainly set the course of Kempo differently than where it had been. I can tell you exactly where I was. I was lying in bed, sleeping peacefully, about 5 a.m. when the phone rang. I answered, and it was my instructor, Al Tracy. He apologized for the hour. He told me he had waited to call me. He was on the East Coast, and I was in California. And he told me that Ed Parker had died. And we spent the next half an hour talking and remembering, reminiscing. He was Al's direct instructor, and his boss. Al was my boss and my instructor, but at one particular time that was very, very, well, it was momentous to me, was the evening I got my brown belt. It was 1966. We did testing and then had a banquet, so people were promoted and they didn't know if you weren't called, they didn't know if you had tested or hadn't tested. So it was to keep things, anybody from being embarrassed. At that particular time, Ed Parker came up and taught the class, and then my training partner, Rick Harper, and I were selected to assist him in the demonstration that he was going to do that evening. He taught us the two-man set and then taught us each 3 techniques that we were going to do. I remember I did breaking toward the end of the demonstration. Ed Parker was sitting about 5 feet to my right, seated in a chair and looking straight at me. When I hit the board, it split in the middle board, and it flew out straight at his face. And without even blinking, he just brought his hand up and knocked it out of the way. His expression didn't change. And he looked at the boards and then looked at me and then nodded like, "Hit it again, kid." I don't know why, that's always stuck in my mind. But Christmas time brings about those memories, those recollections, those remembrances with great impact. And I just want to take this time. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, a healthy Christmas, and all the best to you.
So let's go up to Napa Valley and talk to Chuck Sullivan's top students, Tim Beers. Tim, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you very much.
Can you expand on the inspiration of the Ed Parker legacy and teachings that he shared with your teacher, Chuck Sullivan, one of Mr. Parker's first black belts, and how that's guided you through your journey?
I'd have to say that it's probably the nicest group of people that you could ever meet. I am probably one of the few people that you're speaking with today that did not know Mr. Parker on a personal basis. The one thing that I can tell you is the 2 times that I did meet him was at the original Karate Connection. And when I started in 1981, I was an orange belt. And in October of that year, Mr. Parker came to do 3 promotions. And just the aura of the man walking in was just something you could feel that he was a special person. He smiled at everybody. He was very much glad to meet everybody. Before we went ahead and we did class, us that were colored belts, we were doing some sparring, and he actually stopped everyone from talking with him. And he stopped and he crossed his arms and had this great big smile and just watched us spar away. And the people were trying to shake his hand and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And he's just like going, "Hey, I'm watching these guys." You know, and that was very, very impressive to see a man like Mr. Parker and have that happening. So what had happened later on during that class was we had Vic LaRue and George Canonis, Crazy George, and Chuck Sullivan were going to be getting their 5th, 6th, and 7th degree promotions at night. So when we're all sitting back and the 3 gentlemen are sitting down and they're taking their belts off and they were putting on their new rank, and I could just see the smile on Mr. Parker's face. And they got up one at a time, and their promotional kicks was something that I will never forget because of the power that came out of that man. And each one of them getting kicked was just like, "Thank you, sir. May I have another," like in the movie. And then when it came time for Chuck getting kicked, I think Chuck got it a little harder than the other 3. And I said to myself, you know what? I want that. And I realized what a brotherhood this is. And it just made me want to come back to class again. And then the second time that I had seen Mr. Parker, he came back about 2 years later to go hang out with the usual group. My first instructor, Rick Hughes, was the person who, in the very first class, made me realize that this is what I want to train. This is what I want to do. Mainly what had happened was I had a confrontation in a bar with someone much larger than me, and I said, I will never be humiliated again. Rick Hughes, who was incredibly fast, said, "This is for the guy in the bar that does the John Wayne punch on you." And I went, "Oh my God, I'm in the right place." And just had an opportunity to start going to fight night and learning in fight night that sometimes BKF people would come over. It's the first time that I met Steve Sanders, Steve Muhammad, and of course, Robert Temple and those gentlemen there. And putting on the pads and having to spar with some of those people, thank God I was an orange belt. And I mean that jokingly, because they were playing with me, but what an experience. And it made me learn there's a lot more to learn. Keep on coming back to class. So I stayed with them, and I took a little bit of time off. And then after Mr. Parker had passed away, I went back and talked to Chuck. And he said, "We have the International Karate Connection Association going. Why don't you come back, Tim? You've been with us a long time." And a year later, got my black belt and am now a 9th degree with Chuck. And that is my adventure.
What was the greatest inspirational lesson you learned from Mr. Sullivan that he attributed to Ed Parker?
Always be a gentleman. Always respect other people. Always look at people without judging them. And that is one of the most wonderful things about Chuck, is he is always Chuck, and he will always treat everyone the same. And, you know, talk about the nicest person that you'd ever meet. My father used to love coming to the Karate Connection back in the 80s. Mainly, my dad would wait all through class just to talk to Chuck after class. And now my dad was a 2nd degree black belt in Okinawa Judo and taught hand-to-hand combat in the Korean War. So my dad was no one to mess with. So he would show me some judo moves. And then when I started learning some Kempo, I would come back after class and go, "Dad, take a look at this move. Take a look at this one." He goes, "Okay, slow that down." And my dad said, "I'll show you what I know after you get your basics down stronger." And boy, talk about wanting to just like button down and just learn the basics. And even after orange belt, purple belt, you still have to go back to basics, or anything you do, even into ranks of black belt, it will not work without those strong basics. And with my dad telling me that, it was very influential for me to not only pay attention, but just keep wanting to go back.
Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate your contribution there.
Hello, my name's Jerry Smith. I was the first vice president and the current president of the 50-year-old BKF, Black Karate Federation. I want to tell you a little bit about my association with Grandmaster Ed Parker. And I was at Black Belt Magazine during the time, I call it the golden days early on. It was like the dream job. Well, one of those people who used to come up was Grandmaster Ed Parker. And he was the most inquisitive man that I've ever met. I mean, and you would think, great karate, that was it. But no, 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 no. He wanted to know. He would come back to where I was working and, introduce himself. And he knew me from tournaments. And he was saying, Cheri, look, why don't you tell me about what you're doing and how it's done? He says, I'm working on some Kempo Karate books. I might have you help me with designing the covers. And I said, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Well, that never happened, but whenever he would come up, he would come back and he'd spend more time with me than Mito wanted him to. When anybody ever came in, Mito only wanted them to come in his office and talk to him. He was not crazy about having us talk to anybody who came up. But anyway, that is the way that we met. We actually, Mr. Parker and I met. I would see him at tournaments and whatever, but the way that we really kind of met and talked, it was a lot. Well, this goes forward, maybe I would say about a year later. There was a special tournament. And I think it may have been a full contact tournament. I'm not sure. My mentor, Joe Lewis, was fighting John Natividad it was either at the Wilshire Ebell Theater or the Elks Lodge. And I think it probably was the Wilshire Ebell Theater because the Elks Lodge, I think, is in Northern California. Well, anyway, I was there and it was really weird to have them fighting because they were fighting on a elevated stage, and there was nothing to keep them from falling off the stage if they got really physical. So I went up high so I could look down. So there was nobody out. Most of the seats that were up high were not taken. And who comes walking up to me but Mr. Parker? And he got with that big voice of his, that big Hawaiian, Cheri. I go, Mr. Parker, hi, how are you doing? I go, fine. And he looks at me, he goes, Cheri. I go, yes. He goes, you really love karate, don't you? I said, yes, Mr. Parker, I really do. But since we were up there alone, it just dawned on me, he was the first person that I ever actually seen physically do martial arts. And I said, well, I have something to tell you. He goes, well, I said, do you realize that you are the first person that I ever physically seen do karate? And he goes, really, Cheri? How is that? And I told him about the Art Link letter. He goes, you saw that, Cheri? You saw that? He goes, yeah. And he started to laugh. And for some strange reason, we just from that point on, we were like two kids. We were way up in the back. Nobody knew we were back. And he was telling me he said, Cheri, when I first came here to America, he goes, I went to Brigham Young, and he said, I'm an island boy. I'm brown and I'm big. And he says, I experienced some discrimination too. It was very subtle, but they did. And he said, so I understand how that feels. So from that point on, whenever I would go to the internationals, he would always invite me over to sit with him and his wife. And I would sit there for maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes because all my guys were there and they were fighting and I wanted to be with them. So I would scurry away. But that was the beginning of the relationship that I had with Mr. Parker. It was just a wonderful, wonderful meeting. That's the way I met him. And from that point on, we just had this very, very special relationship. Okay, in closing, I'm very thankful to be able to share my views on Grandmaster Ed Parker. It was very special to me. And I would like to wish everyone out there a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year from me and all the guys and gals at the BKF. So Merry Christmas, everybody.
Hi, my name is Rick Avery. I'm a 7th degree black belt in Kempo, and back in 1986, I was a 4th degree black belt. And Mr. Parker came to my school in Santa Barbara. I was having a test for my students, and I decided to have the promotion and test in a park, and I was warned by some other black belts that Mr. Parker might not like that. How wrong they were. He loved it. Mr. Parker was someone who loved change in Kempo, in life, and we had a great test. He surprised me that day by having me stand in the promotion line, kicked me. Thank God I was doing sit-ups at the time, and promoted me to 5th degree black belt, which is the certificate behind me. We went out for dinner afterwards, and if I recall correctly, he played the ukulele for us. Mr. Parker should be remembered on this holiday season. A wonderful, warm, kind man that you didn't want to cross or get on his bad side. Anyway, happy holidays, everybody, and let's bless the memory of Mr. Edmund Parker.
Hello, I'm representing the Kempo Women's Symposium. I'm Barbara White. In this season of giving, I'm happy to talk about the gift of Ed Parker. What he gave us is a system that's based on logic and that we can share with our students and pass down to others. You know, we just had our tournament today for the Royal Family Kids, and it was attended by so many Kempo schools, and the common denominator is Kempo schools. And had it not been for Ed Parker, we would not have had this tournament in which we were able to raise quite a bit of money for Royal Families, and so many other things that he's influenced us in, and directly and indirectly. And most important, the gift of my husband, which I have to thank Ed Parker for. And on behalf of my husband and me, we'd like to wish you a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Jamie Seabrook, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
How is Kempo in Canada?
Kempo is awesome right now. I'm loving it. I train today like it's day one. It's something that I love to do. It's part of who I am.
It's your passion.
It's my passion.
You never met Ed Parker, or did you meet Mr. Parker?
I did meet Ed Parker. So this
Nice.
is interesting. I started Kempo in 1985. And at the time, it was a bit of a hybrid Tracy Parker. So it wasn't the system as we know today, the American Kempo system. And then around 87-ish, around there, I got my hands on some old VHS Panther series of some of the Kempo practitioners that were putting stuff out on the market. And then I realized that there was differences in how I was doing things, and I started to go the American Kempo route. And then in 1990, there was the Canadian Internationals martial arts tournaments right in my hometown in London, Ontario. And Ed Parker was there as the special guest. And other people were there as well. Joe Palanzo's demo team was there. Dennis Tosin was there, who unfortunately just recently passed away. He was a great man. And anyway, I got an opportunity to meet and chat with Ed Parker at the Canadian Internationals in between all the divisions. I was competing there as well. And I was there with my father. My dad was is such an inspiration. He's the reason why he kept me in martial arts and motivated me throughout the years when I was a young kid. But what I remember about meeting with Ed Parker, we spoke for about 10 to 15 minutes. And I, first of all, like you, it was like meeting Bruce Lee. But one of the things that I was so shocked about, I'm meeting Ed Parker, was there was no hierarchy. Like, he just talked to me like he knew me. And it was amazing. He asked me what divisions I was competing in, how long I've been training in Kempo. And it was just a really regular conversation. I remember myself and my dad shaking his hands, and he had those big, big, big mitts of hands that, you know, my goodness, those could do some serious damage. And then that evening, everything was really lagged behind. Usually tournaments end, 5, 6 o'clock. I think it went on to something like 8. And then we had an evening show where we were going to do a Filipino martial arts demonstration in the evening show. And Ed Parker, I actually have it on YouTube, was right up watching as the special honored guest. So it was like, it was just a great opportunity, not only to meet him, but for him to actually, even though I wasn't able to talk to him after that moment, to actually watch me do some of the Filipino martial arts stuff in conjunction with my Kempo.
What is the greatest inspirational lesson you've learned from Mr. Parker's system?
I would say that Kempo has so much that it can last a lifetime. And, I always say this, while there might be arts that maybe put more emphasis, say, on kicking or choking or throwing, Kempo is exposed to all of it. It's all encompassing. So it's like, I feel like the more that I train and the more I learn and learn more about what I don't know, the more I realize that it could take 5 lifetimes. There's just so much in Kempo, and I love that pursuit of greater knowledge. I think that's one of the main things that I take from it.
Thank you, Jamie. I really appreciate your contribution.
I've been an active student of Kempo since 1967. First of all, I wanted to thank you, Paul, for asking me to say a few words about Ed Parker, the man who changed my life and so many others in so many different ways. First of all, I'd like to mention that the 4 priorities in Ed Parker's life were in this order. Number 1, God. Number 2, family. Number 3, country. And number 4, Kempo. Few people know what a religious man he was. And when he was not traveling, every Sunday, he went to church with his family, who has now grown from 4 daughters and 1 son to 20 grandchildren and 36 great-grandchildren, and still growing today. Also, few people know that Ed Parker taught Bible study in his church to little kids. He loved the little ones, whether it was his grandkids or kids in the church or whomever. All of us that were going to have a lesson with Mr. Parker knew 3 things. Number 1, we were going to train really hard. Number 2, we were going to learn something. And it just was a reflection of how he could share what he knew about Kempo with us. And it was always exciting to have a lesson with him, because we were going to have fun, we were going to train hard, and we were going to learn something new every session. And it is important for all of us to remember what his philosophy and beliefs of life and Kempo were. It can be done by researching some of the books he wrote. In the series, Infinite Insights into Kempo, such as book number 1, if you would just read the dedication of that book and then go to book number 4, read the dedication in that book, and then go to book number 5 and read the Black Belt Pledge. It will tell you a lot about what his beliefs are about Kempo and people in life is all about. Also, a lot of Mr. Parker's belief can be found in these 2 books. 1, the Evidence Study Bible, and 2, Scientific Facts in the Bible. Both of these can be found from livingwaters.com. It's not a plug. It's just that I know what he believed, and it's encompassed in those two books if people will take the time to look at it. Thanks to Mr. Parker what he taught me about life, I was able to forgive the man who murdered Angelo, my 28-year-old son. Sorry. I miss them both every day. Now, Mr. Ed Parker believed, as I do, that the reason for Christmas is the birth of Jesus Christ. I pray that all of you parents out there will also teach your children the same. And at this time, I'd like to wish all of you a very Merry Christmas, a happy and safe New Year's. And I ask this all in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Well, my name is Tom Bleeker. I first met Ed Parker in 1962, when I joined the Los Angeles School at the age of 16. I'd been bullied in high school, and I needed I was having a lot of problems in my life. Not only the bully, but I was being kicked out of high school. I've been in trouble with the law. I mean, I had a lot of problems. And Ed Parker came along at the right time. I mean, he really did. He said, I don't know what would have ever become of me had I not joined that school and met Ed Parker. I think one of my fondest memories of him are in the early years, in the founding years, when his students called him Ed. We were on a first name basis. It was really like one of the guys. I mean, I say that now and people think it's disrespectful. That wasn't the case. I mean, that's what he wanted. And he used to come down to Chuck Sullivan's. He had some wonderful parties then, almost every other weekend, it seemed. And there was smoke billowing and drinking going on. And Chuck had a dice table going on. It was everything a Mormon wouldn't attend. Drinking, smoking, and gambling. But Ed would come by and, back then, if you were smoking, you kept smoking. If you drink, but nowadays, in his later years, you didn't do any of that around him. I remember in the early years, they even had ashtrays in the viewing room, and we'd be doing drills up and down, and smoke would be coming out on the mat. So those were different times. I think the best times I ever had with him were when I was young. The ones that really stick with me. I was in the mid 60s. I was dating Diane Linkletter. I was engaged to her, and Ed Parker had appeared on Art's TV show. I think it was called The House Party. I have a photo of that on my computer somewhere. And Art owned the Valley Music Theater that was out in Encino or Woodland Hills, I think it was. And we were going out there on the weekends to see live musicals. And I asked Art one time if it'd be okay if Ed Parker came along, because I knew he'd been on his show. And he said, fine. And we went to those many times to the theater. And before that, we would go to the Sportsman's Lodge to have dinner. And I was really impressed about how Ed Parker was able to stay in a great conversation with Art Linkletter, a very worldly man, throughout dinner. I mean, I don't know if Art thought he was going to be talking to a Kempo thug. I don't think so, because he researched anybody that appeared on his show. But Ed Parker was a highly educated man, and he had a college degree, and he was worldly himself. And it was interesting to sit there I was 16 years old, 17 years old, 18, whatever, when we were going. So those were some really memorable times with him when I felt that we were just friends. And he wasn't old enough to be my father, but he was 32 when I met him, and I was 6. There's over the 16-year difference. But he was definitely somebody who I needed in my life as a father figure. And I greatly admired him, and I was just loved being around him. And over the years, we maintained our friendship. We had a lot of friends in the Hollywood film and television industry together, and we just always remained friends for many, many years. And then, of course, the highlight of my relationship with him was undoubtedly the tribute that was in February of 1988. I know it meant a lot to him, and it meant a lot to many of the people in our community. And there's still audio, there's still film of that around that people have seen. It was a wonderful night. Anyway, I want to wish a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to our Kempo community, which is growing leaps and bounds with every year. And I just hope my wife and I, Lourdes, send the best holiday wishes to everyone in our community.
Hi, this is Joe Rebelo, known to many of you in the martial arts world and the internet as Kempo Joe. I was asked to talk about reflections of Mr. Parker and stories about Mr. Parker. I was very fortunate and very blessed to have worked with Mr. Parker from 1983 till his death in 1990. Many times Mr. Parker demonstrating personally on me for many of the seminars that he did throughout the New England area and taking the time to talk to me personally and answer my questions as well. Again, I had so many great memories of him demonstrating on me. Everything from doing one seminar, hand sword at the back of my head, the end of 5 swords, and Louis almost knocked the contact lenses out of my eye. Another time hitting me with a heel palm in the chin at the end of during the course of a glancing salute. I mean, there were many times that Mr. Parker took the time to personally demonstrate on me. Again, we know the phrase, to hear is to doubt, to see is to be deceived, to feel is to believe, and I felt and I believed. Simply stated, Ed Parker was one of the greatest martial minds of the 20th century. His innovative thought process was quoted not only in his books Infinite Insights. I remember John Cochran and Emil Farkas in their Overlooked Martial Arts Dictionary quoting Mr. Parker as a separate category as opposed to like Japanese or Chinese. One of the categories, of course, was Ed Parker and his theories, concepts, vocabulary, and terminology that were instrumental to teaching all of us how to become better martial artists, not only in Kempo, but in the martial arts in general. How blessed, how fortunate I was to go to dinner with him, to break bread with him, to take the time to sit down with him and ask questions. As he would say, he said, if you have a question, write it down and ask me. I'm true to his word. I stuck to that, and I came in and I had questions. I really, honestly, and sincerely wanted to know, and he never forgot that. You know, he did. I had to call him one day at his house, and he was doing a private lesson. So the person who was doing the lesson, what he said, you know, these people in New England, they really want to learn what I do. They really want to take the time, and I definitely took the time. And to this day, I am blessed and fortunate and honored and privileged to have known the man, the legacy of Edmund K. Parker. I miss you every day, Mr. Parker. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Eric Lee. I'm here to speaking of my good friend, Mr. Ed Parker. Okay, he's a very special and unique individual. And I used to compete at his tournament back to 70s. That's how I started to meet him. And he's always full of charismatic. And every time we talk on the phone, he said, Eric, you got one for me? I said, what do you mean? That means he asked me if I have a new joke for him. I remember my first joke. I told him, okay, I said, why don't they have telephone books in China? Because there are too many wings and wrongs, you can wing number. And so he laughed and he would tell me one. See, we often go to the place called Wong Kok in Chinatown. One of his, in LA Chinatown, one of his favorite restaurants called Wong Kok is still there. So we would order a lot of food. And then, you know, as Mr. Parker loved to eat, but he won't eat until the rice arrives. So all the dishes right there, the waiter bring in all the dishes and no rice. So he just sit there and wait and like this. And I said, Mr. Parker, why don't you eat first? I said, no rice, no eat. So he won't eat. So that's one of our jokes. Remember, 1986, he took me, Frank Trejo, Sensei Yamashita, and let's see, Dominique Valère. 1986, we would visit the president of Chile. And then we were on some kind of TV station, and we visit him. He didn't speak English. And my student, Julio Hernandez, would interpret for us. So Mr. Parker, and then we went to do a lot of press publicity, and we were on some kind of TV station, and he got so much energy, he put his foot in the platform, and he stuck there, it won't come out. He broke the platform in the TV station. We were just laughing. Mr. Parker, you need some help? I said, no, I can do it myself. So he would pull out the foot, and that the TV station, the people, the technical people say, can we call the ambulance? I said, no need. He said, no need. So we were, the the sport soccer, the kickball, was #1 sport. But his student, his name was Arturo Petit, I remember. Mr. Parker tell me, when you shake hand with my student, make sure you hold on to your wallet, because if you have a hole in your wallet, he'll go all the way down to your socks to find your wallet. So I got it. So Kempo was the only style. So when we do something different, like Kung Fu or Japanese style or Yamashita, and everything is magical to the people. They were really hospitable. They just love us. And so they would put us on top of the shoulder and then carry us all the way. And they would have about 200-300 people put their hand together like this, and we'll walk between. And by the time we get into the room, we have to sit down for a while. It was hot and humid. And we're just like Beatles. Do I want to do that again? I don't know. I think about it first, because it's too much. And I can see you don't want to be like Beatles, because you get overwhelmed by the people, and it's just too many people. And so anyway, I don't know how many fun, memorable experience. And when we did travel to Chile, and that time we were on 1986, it was fantastic. And we did 3 expo, Conception, and many country, and then many cities. I would say that was quite a memorable experience. Anyway, I don't want to talk too much now, because you might call a cop on me and being polluting the air. So I don't want to do that. Anyway, I like to all you folks have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful and Christmas. And then also I like to see all of us.
Let's go on and finally finish up with our good friend Gary. How you doing, Gary Ellis? It's good to have you here.
Hi, sir. I'm doing well, thank you.
Can you reflect on if you had a relationship with Ed Parker? Did you meet Mr. Parker?
Yes, I did. I was Mr. Parker's IKK representative in England, over here in the UK, from 1980 through to 1990 when he passed.
I see.
So yes, we used to get Mr. Parker in regularly over for seminars. So yes, we had a good time with him. He was just an amazing character. In fact, I first met Mr. Parker in 1978 at an Elvis Presley convention in London. Several of us traveled up to meet him. We weren't part of the IKKA then, but he embraced us as soon as he knew we were Kempo guys, and he did his thing at the convention, and afterwards he was going to sign autographs, and he asked if we could just go with him. And he sat at that table, and I sat beside him, and they must have signed maybe 400-500 autographs. Every person, he looked at them square in the eyes, gave them a big smile, asked their name, and gave each one a different personal message. He made everyone feel so special, and the sweat was running off his brow, and he was really working hard. But that was the greatest lesson for me, was that how to treat everyone with respect. And I was just absolutely in awe of his the way that he did that. And of course, you know, he had that presence about him. It was just an amazing sort of aura. And if you got hit by him, well, you certainly knew. You certainly knew when he was there. And what's really amazing is, you know, he would be demonstrating something at a seminar, and you'd feel that awesome power, you know, and then he'd walk off, and there'd be somebody on the side with a little baby, and he'd be cuckooing that baby, and it is a completely different person to this such a powerful person. You know, you just had that feeling of helplessness when he was working on you, and you knew it was only like 5-10% of that energy and that power that he was delivering to you.
In all those years that you were with him, Can you share a private moment that was away from the Kempo seminar or out on a mat or something like that? Can you share something more private that was personally that you take with you always?
Well, he rang me up one day and he said, I want you to do a job for me. I said, yes, sir. Well, anything that you want, within reason. And he said, I want you to go to Pinewood Studios. I want you to teach an actress some Kempo for a film that we're doing. It was Leslie Ash, and the film was Curse of the Pink Panther. So I spent 12 weeks up there working with Leslie, preparing her for the fight scenes in the film. And a couple of times I went around, he was staying at the Dorchester, and he invited me over for meals, and I'd go up to the bedroom there, and we just have them, he'd have the meals sent up, and we just spent evenings just talking Kempo. It was absolutely amazing experience. And it just seems like another world now. It's just so long ago. But he was just so thoughtful, just amazing. He said, how much have you negotiated for doing the job? And I gave him the figure. He said, you should have rung me. He said, I could have got you twice that amount. And he was really upset because he, when he thought, he could have got me a little bit more. Bless him. Just an amazing person.
Last time you saw him?
In 1990, we had him over. And that was interesting as well, because we were doing a bit of, he was teaching a part of Form 7, the first part. And he showed something, and then he was stood over on the side. And I'm practicing, and I look over, and his eyes were almost closed, and he was just quite motionless. And he was connecting with something higher. You could see that there was a definite sort of, he was, quite an amazing person. Touched my life completely. And Kempo has been a part of my life since around 77. I started. One of the things that stuck out for me was the fact that I started off in an offshoot of Kempo, which wasn't Ed Parker's Kempo, but there were elements in there which it was just the logic of it, because I'd had some experience in Taekwondo and traditional karate before. And then when we got with Ed Parker, well, the logic, the power, I remember taking my first degree under him. We did the test, and afterwards he sat down and he pulled out this big white box, put it on the table, and out came the manuscript for the first of the Infinite Insight series before it was published. And he sat there and he's going through this, and he was just so proud of this, and he was like a kid in the sweet shop. It was amazing. Just to spend that special moment with him, that was just fantastic. Yeah. I miss him every day. It's just such a sad thing that he went so soon.
Hello, we're the Temple family. I'm Cheri.
And I'm Robert.
And we'd like to bring you greetings from Brian Hawkins Kempo
and the International Christian Karate Association.
First of all, we'd like to thank Paul Casey for giving us an opportunity to just share a couple of memories from our martial arts journey as it relates to Mr. Parker. Unfortunately, I started after Mr. Parker had passed away. I started in '92. And through my journey, I really wanted to know more about him. And I came across an interview that he had done in one of the martial arts magazines. So that was great. I love the things that I read about him. And then in addition to that, I got a chance to meet a lot of the seniors that were longtime students and friends of Mr. Parker. And that just gave me such great insight, helping me as I moved through my journey to own my Kempo and to make it work and effective for me in a world of much bigger, taller, stronger guys. But it was a wonderful insight into him, and I love what was shared through everyone.
And with myself, I had opportunities to meet Mr. Parker, mainly at the international martial arts events that he threw for years that I participated in. And during that time, I was so busy with competing, I didn't have the time or make the time really to get to know him in a more personal way. But well, one opportunity I did have was years after I competed, I seen him at this one event. It was a kickboxing match at the Hollywood Palladium. And when I came up to say hello, he greeted me with one of the biggest hugs I ever felt in my life.
Yeah.
And at that point, I knew that he knew what family I came from and that I was part of his family.
Yeah.
And that just set the tone for the rest of my martial arts career. And I just want to thank our martial arts community and family for always allowing us to know that we're a part of you. And on that note, both me and my wife desire to wish everyone a very merry Christmas and a happy new year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bishop Donnie Williams, and some of you may know me as Grandmaster Williams from the Black Karate Federation. I'm here to give a tribute to Mr. Ed Parker. I'm thankful that all of you had the opportunity to spend time with Mr. Parker. I'm thankful to have some time with Mr. Parker. And most of all, Paul Casey, I thank him for giving me this privilege to speak to the Kempo organization, the Kempo family. I thank you for that. Now I want to say this to you. Mr. Parker was a man that loved God. I pray that my life will reflect that I love God as well. And I want to say to everyone that this is a time that we should come together to let everybody in the Kempo karate world know that we are going forward and not backwards. Thanks to Mr. Parker. This is Donnie Williams saying thank you.
So I want to thank everybody for their participation here today. Gary, Tommy, Jamie, Todd, Tim, and Brian. And I just want to know your final thoughts, starting with you, Mr. Burks. What are your final thoughts on today?
I want to say I really appreciate you inviting me to be on here with all these other distinguished gentlemen for this event. Again, it's a great tribute to Mr. Parker, who we all owe so much because without him, none of us would even have ever met each other, etc. You know, we're living in a very sad time right now in this world. And I would love to see Kempo bring people closer together. You know, it's kind of like Mr. Duffy was talking about. I taught for several years with the Kaji Kempo people. And in 2015 was the last time they had their annual event up here. And one of their black belts walked up and he asked me, he said, what do you remember most about Mr. Parker? And I said, you know, one of the things I remember most, he was the most humble person I ever met in my life. And I think all of us need to strive more for that. You know, right now, like I say, this world is in sad shape. And I think those of us in the Kempo world can help bring people back together, you know, especially as a family, like Mr. Parker wanted it to be. And again, he gave all of us so much. He gave us everything he had. And, you know, I told him on June 17th, 1990, after a seminar he did that weekend, and Mr. Duffy was at that seminar that weekend, I told him, I said, Mr. Parker, you need to slow down. He goes, I can't. I said, what do you mean you can't? He said, I've got too much stuff I still need to get out to you guys. And I said, we'd rather have you than anything else you can bring out here. We've got stuff we can work on for the rest of our life. And again, it's just like Mr. Ellis said, I think of him every day. You know, he made the hugest impact in my life of anyone that's ever been in my life. You know, I didn't have a close relationship with my dad, but I had an extremely close relationship with Mr. Parker. And like I say, you know, like Mr. Seabrook was saying, he made everybody feel special. And we need to all thrive to be more like, you know, he was. And I'd like to wish everybody Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and looking forward to a brighter year next year than some of the things that's happened this year. But we have to approach that with a positive attitude to help make that happen. And again, appreciate you for letting me be on here today.
Thank you, sir. Let's go down to Jamie Seabrook. Final thoughts?
A lot of the same. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And I completely agree with Tommy Burks. You know, I think that martial arts, besides teaching us how to protect ourselves and stay in shape mentally and physically, it's about humility. And to me, the gathering of people with like-minded, shared ideas, we can agree, we can disagree, but ultimately we're all in the same amazing system together, and that's what it's all about. So train. Don't let the outside distractions affect you. That's my way of thinking. And likewise, Merry Christmas to all of you, and a great Happy New Year. And keep training. Martial arts can help you for the rest of your life.
Gary Ellis, final thoughts?
Well, one of my endearing memories of Mr. Parker is the fact that he loved his Kenpo family, the diversity of it, and all the different people in all the different countries. And he just promoted that family feeling and that feeling of love and support. And I think it's just a wonderful thing that it's still going today. It's getting bigger and it's so diverse. And it's all down to that one man. And I'd just like to say thank you for this opportunity to be able to sit and talk about him a little bit with my humble experiences with him. And I just say it's just an amazing honor to be able to sit here and do that with such esteemed company. I wish everyone a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, sir, very much. That's very heartfelt, and we appreciate that. Going down, Tim, how are you, sir? Final thoughts?
Final thoughts is Kempo definitely is a family. I could say it's a brotherhood, and I don't mean this lightly. It truly is a brotherhood. And the memories that we have, no one can ever take from us. The times that we've had, a lot of cracking up and a lot of, ouch, are you okay? And a lot of, let me help you off the mat. But it doesn't matter because we're all friends, we're all family. Anyone in Kempo, like I had spoken to you a couple of weeks ago, and it felt like when we got off that I'd known you like for 25 years. And that's wonderful. So my final thought is thank you again for the invitation for this, and thank you, gentlemen, for the time. And Merry Christmas to you all. And thank goodness we are all still here for another Christmas.
Thank you, Tim. That was very, very nice of you. I appreciate you. Let's go down to Brian Duffy. Brian, final thoughts and wishes for us for this holiday season.
Well, I want to thank you, Paul, for having me on and with this very distinguished panel and all the seniors that are going to put the anecdotes in. I think that, you know, I echo the thoughts of the other gentlemen who have spoken before about this being a family. And I want to reiterate the fact that, you know, one of the things that Mr. Parker did was build relationships with people as opposed to just going out and teaching. And that's a very important thing. And that's something that the rest of the gentlemen have echoed as well. And my good friend John Sepulveda, when he teaches seminars, he always says, you know, let's go make some memories. And when it comes down to it, you know, we're all part of the martial arts, but the family and the brotherhood, as was mentioned before, is what's special to all of us. I want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and hope to see you all in the new year out on the mats or just socially.
Thank you, Brian, and give our very best to your wife. And
thank you. I will.
Not to play more games with you like that. Finally, last but not least, Todd Durgan. Todd, your final thoughts and wishes for the holiday season.
First of all, I respectfully thank you for the pleasure and honor of being here with all of these fine gentlemen. With regard to family, I think that if we really look at what Ed Parker left us, it is that family that we have all acquired throughout the world. And hopefully, as Mr. Seabrook said, we can agree and disagree, but we can do that respectfully. So yeah, my humblest thank yous for being here. I look forward to many, many years of Kempo and learning and training, and hopefully get to meet each and every one of you if I haven't already, and spend some time on the mat. And I wish everybody a happy and healthy holiday season.
Thank you, Todd. I want to say, gentlemen, thank you on the bottom of my heart. I wish your families a beautiful, safe, prosperous holiday that you can reflect, remember that, and later on in life, you'll say, wow, I was inspired by that moment at Christmas 2022. I look forward to seeing everybody again in the future. There will always be an open door policy here at the Kempo Karate Hall of Fame educational videos series. When we do these Zooms meetings, you are always welcome to join us, because I think the best thing is we can have a dialogue and we can share ideas, concepts. Maybe there'll be something we will learn from one another. And that was the whole purpose of Mr. Parker's system, for us to think and to explore and expand and develop these principles and concepts and flesh them out. And if we meet each other on the mat, we create memories, just it won't hurt. I remember that. He said that to me, did a seminar, and I was contortionist that day. He says, you didn't think I was going to do that? And I said, Mr. Parker, I just hoped it didn't hurt. Wonderful guy, wonderful man, very genuine, and it rubs off on every one of you. It's obvious. So I'm going to close it out now. My name is Paul Casey. I would like to thank these gentlemen for being a part of it. I would like to say to Tim Beers, Gary Ellis, Jamie Seabrook, Brian Duffy, Todd Durgan, and Tommy Burks. Thank you, gentlemen, for contributing today, taking time out of your schedule to reflect, remember, and share stories of inspiration from our founder, Edmund K. Parker. With no further ado, I wish you and your families a beautiful and healthy, safe holiday season. We look forward to seeing everybody in 2023. And with no more, salute.